Picture a small to medium-sized organisation on the verge of collapse, grappling with a disjointed IT infrastructure, plagued by security vulnerabilities, and struggling to maintain a cohesive remote workforce. In a bold move, the company decides to embrace next-gen Windows, and specifically Windows 365, hoping not only to salvage their business, but to push the limits of what they thought was possible in terms of efficiency, collaboration, and security. For those wondering, Next-Gen Windows is a collection of tools that provides organisations with the ability to do more with less, while enabling secure access to corporate resources from anywhere. So back to the story. Within a matter of months, the company underwent a complete transformation. By adopting Windows 365's cloud-based approach, they significantly reduced their IT costs and streamlined their operations. Their security posture saw a marked improvement as well, with advanced threat protection features providing a robust shield against cyber attacks and safeguarding sensitive data. Moreover, employee productivity soared as Windows 365's virtualized desktop environment enabled the team to work efficiently and effectively from anywhere, on any device. The organisation's newfound agility allowed them to pivot and adapt to the ever-changing business landscape, ensuring their long-term success. This astounding story exemplifies the power of 365 in driving business transformation, enhancing IT operations, and empowering end users with the tools they need to excel in an ever-changing digital world. This is a story of many, and there's lots of organisations that have been through a similar transformation. Welcome to today's episode of the Empowering the Hybrid Workforce podcast, where we delve into the incredible potential of Windows 365 and how it's transforming the way organisations operate in a hybrid work environment. Join us as we embark on this journey into the next generation of Windows, uncovering the true potential of Windows 365 and how it's revolutionising the way we work, connect and innovate. As always, I'm joined by Bjorn. Bjorn, it's good to see you.
Hello.
It seems to me, Bjorn, that every organisation in every industry is looking to do more with less, and hybrid work is here to stay. What do you think?
Yes, very much so. With constraints from the outside, factors like economic changes and rise in electricity costs and other factors, we see more and more organizations really need to become more and more efficient. So doing more with less, as it's promoted not just by Microsoft, by other organizations, is very much on the agenda for really all organizations. And these incredible services like Windows 365 build a solid and robust platform to achieve that.
Excellent. The hybrid work model has become a significant aspect of the modern work landscape. I've seen a lot of organisations are really now embracing remote and flexible work arrangements to maintain productivity while ensuring employee well-being. Digital transformation does seem to be the imperative though, so particularly the shift to cloud-based solutions, and I find that it really does play a critical role in enabling that hybrid work model. I think Windows 365, or sometimes it's referred to Cloud PC technology, supports that paradigm shift by providing that seamless and flexible Windows experience across various devices and locations. Obviously, it's a cloud-based solution, and again, we've talked about this on other podcasts. It really does empower employees to access their work environment from anywhere. But what I find really intriguing is how it offers that robust security stance, but also a simplified IT management approach as well. Is there anything that you've seen in any of the recent releases that you think are really intriguing that we should be talking about?
Yeah, very much. First of all, to really give our listeners a good understanding, Windows 365 is a cloud-based operating system, and therefore you can use any device that is available to you, personal devices or any other device, to log on to the corporate environment, giving you this Windows 365 experience together with the corporate apps already pre-installed on that cloud experience. So exactly as you describe, in a hybrid work environment, it doesn't really matter if you are working in the corporate office or working from home. It doesn't matter which device you're using, but logging onto the Windows 365 experience with the overarching zero trust architecture that has been implemented, you can be assured that the security posture is there, and all your corporate apps and the corporate data is very much in place.
Thank you. When we talk about Windows 365 or next gen Windows, excuse me. Start again. So what are some of the benefits for businesses that you see?
So with Windows 365, there are quite a few benefits. The first one is it's very scalable. If you've got a change demand in a number of users in your workforce, you can very quickly scale this up or down. And because it's a cloud service, the cost that is associated with that very much scales up and down immediately. So it's a very cost-effective way provisioning an operating system, a device in the cloud. The security, obviously, the security posture is far more condensed and concise, and therefore, again, there's a much lower cost entry point to provision and maintain that security posture. So there are quite a lot of different aspects, but also the versatility by giving different users and the different personas within your organization different sets of applications. You can therefore provision a number of different Windows 365 experiences.
Thank you. I think on top of some of those benefits, if I just summarise what I think I've heard then, so obviously flexibility and scalability, so the ability to scale up or down based on requirements of your workforce, but also be able to adjust the performance, I think is good as well. How often do you hear people leaving organisations? We've talked a lot about employee experience, we've talked a lot about this is on and off the mic. We've talked extensively about organisations and digital skills initiatives and how people are struggling to find good talent and even retain that talent. So if I think about the flexibility and scalability, one of the key issues I've heard from a number of organisations and the reason for people leaving organisations is the IT equipment that they've got. So by actually offering the ability to adjust the performance of some of these cloud PCs, for example, for users depending on their role and depending on what they need to do at certain times, that could be a good factor in attracting but also retaining really, really good talent. You mentioned cost effective. I think that comes back to my last point really. So because it allows you to choose the right performance, I think they call them tiers, don't they? So you can choose the right performance tier for those devices, but then you can scale that based on need, which means you can reduce the cost of purchasing actual physical hardware, and you can provision the right types of devices at the right time for the right people. We touched on it earlier on, the actual productivity benefits. So whilst we're talking specifically about business benefits at the moment, by giving employees access to that work environment from anywhere on any device, you can maintain that productivity in a hybrid model. You don't need to worry about someone leaving their device at home or not having the device with them at the time. And whilst there's some ethics at play in what we ask employees to do, I do think that there's a good cause and a good case for increasing productivity. You touched on security as well. So I think, like you say, it's built on Azure. There's the robust security features and compliance standards as well. And obviously you've got built-in data protection to really help minimise those risks. So I think that's a really good set of benefits for business. What about benefits for IT? So we've talked specifically about the business, but IT, there'll be benefits for them as well in terms of actual IT staff. And I'm not considering that suddenly we're going to be reducing their workload significantly, but there are going to be benefits like simplifying the management of those devices. What else do you think there might be from an IT department benefits perspective?
Yeah, you touched on a really good point there. The management of the device will therefore almost be negated because it's a cloud operating system. It's a cloud device, so to speak, which is a lot easier to manage, and you don't need to manage a myriad and diversified range of different devices with different builds as they are known. Also, the ongoing management of deploying updates to the Windows operating system will fall away because Windows 365 as a cloud service is evergreen, and therefore that aspect of maintaining the build or maintaining that image and build is obviously no longer required. There's a third aspect, the whole scenario of a dispatch of a new device, managing the device as an asset. All of this also will fall away, and it comes with not just a trade-off, with a great benefit for end users. If bring your own device technology is managed effectively, typically if you think about as an individual, as a personal user, I will always buy myself the right type of device that I like, that I want to use, compared to organizations are constrained. Not everybody can have, I don't know, the latest Surface device or the latest Apple laptop or whatever other device of choice you might want to choose. But in provisioning Windows 365 as a cloud service, the end user can use the device of their choice, feel comfortable, have pride in what they're using, with the advantage of having the Windows 365 environment that the organization deems necessary to provide to fulfill their work.
Interesting. I think I'm going to try again to summarize some of those points then. So you mentioned simplified management, we talked about at the start. So it's much easier to manage these cloud PCs, and the tools are familiar still. So IT still have the same tools, endpoint manager, the standard Microsoft tools they're used to using to streamline their deployment and management of devices. They still use those. So again, it's much easier to manage them. You mentioned control, or I would summarize it as control. So maintaining control over those cloud PCs becomes easier, meaning that you can always make sure devices or cloud PCs are compliant with policies and security standards. One of the things you mentioned to me actually before the podcast when we were talking about this subject was around software deployment, so I might circle back to that. But just generally, I think reducing the amount of maintenance that's required, I think, is really important. The way I understand it from some of the deployments we've done is that IT teams in general are spending a significantly lower amount of time managing hardware maintenance anymore, because ultimately that's done for them, which allows them to focus on other more essential tasks and more strategic initiatives, which again is driving value back to them but also to the business. But if I do circle back to software deployment, because I think that's a really interesting point, and we've certainly seen a lot of organisations moving away from things like Citrix, for example, towards solutions like this. So for me, in my understanding around this, is that IT teams can deploy, update, and then maintain their software across all cloud PCs in a really simple way. And again, it's much harder in more traditional physical hardware to do that. Do you think there's any more to the benefits around software deployment? Is there anything new that's been released or anything new in terms of feature sets that helps there?
Yeah, very much so. Again, you're raising an excellent point here. The whole management of apps, and also even further the development of apps, has significantly improved in capabilities. So with the release and rollout of Windows 11, and in combination with that, the latest version of the Microsoft Store, and we talk about the Microsoft App Store here, lots of new features have been made available. So the whole idea of having this next generation of app management and app development is to provide new building tools which now enable you to take your existing code and make it incredibly compelling to be run on Windows. So the scenario could be you have code developed for an Android application which now can be very easily transferred onto an app and made it available as an app for your Windows environment. Another reason why Microsoft Store has been improved, it's now much easier to engage and reach your end user community and deploy the apps and make the apps available. Again, security and compliance is important here, so it's your corporate Microsoft Store of apps that you have full control over. The last one, the development of apps has seen an influx of new capabilities, not to mention AI capabilities, and there's a lot to look forward for. For example, there's now ARM native developer tools made available, ARM, so Azure Resource Manager. So you see the border between Windows and Azure has become even smaller, and I suppose Windows 365 is the best example, being a cloud or Azure hosted service for that.
Really interesting, thank you. Okay, similar vein then. So thinking as an end user, or thinking of end users, what do you think, or what? How could you summarise some of the benefits for end users?
So end users now have the assurance that from whatever the device they log onto this Windows 365 experience, it will always look and feel the same way, because you access it through your browser, and doesn't matter which browser, which device you're coming from, the presented Windows 365 desktop will always look and feel the same way wherever you are. End users will much quicker and easier be able to receive new or other or changed applications within that Windows 365 environment. They can have multiple versions or iterations of their Windows 365 environment depending on their persona or role they fulfill. So they could have one Windows 365 experience where, for example, AutoCAD is provisioned, and for that, those who know AutoCAD, you need a better graphics and more memory, for example. And for the typical Office applications in a different user profile, you have a much slicker and smaller scaled Windows 365 experience. So lots of different features and functionalities here that overall end up giving a benefit to the end user.
Interesting, thank you very much. So I think if I, as before, try and summarise some of that, and maybe see if I can add some flavour there. I think one of the things you mentioned, consistent experience. So this, familiar Windows environment, reducing the learning curve for end users, ultimately allowing them to be more productive is one thing you've touched on. I think the other thing you touched on, without elaborating too much, is the flexibility that it could offer people. So, because it can be accessed across any device, suddenly you can, it doesn't matter if you're on a Windows device, a Mac device, you could be on Android, Linux, iOS, it doesn't matter. That seamless experience happens regardless of device type. I think that's really intriguing. We touched on this throughout, actually, around kind of the improvements around collaboration, but if I think about cloud-based storage, integration with the wider 365 suite, you've got the ability for end users to collaborate much more effectively with colleagues, and again, it's regardless of location, so there's all that benefit. And then the final one you touched on, and we talked about this as well, is around security. I think it's confidence. When I think about security, I think of confidence for an end user. So we can enable them to be more confident, knowing that their data, their applications, etc., they're all secure. And as we all know, with Microsoft, you get enterprise level security features and compliance as standard out the box, which again is another key benefit. So yeah, really, really good. Okay, I'm going to change pace a little bit. So let's see how this goes down. Some people may know, most people probably do. In maths, there's a model called never multiply by zero. Most people know what that is. At Visual, we like to actually apply that mental model from a psychology perspective to technology. So this idea, this model, never multiply by zero, ultimately what it means is basically don't neglect the important aspects of a situation or a behaviour that could render all the other positive work that you've done, either basically useless or significantly impacted. Good example, you could train every day, you could have a really good diet, you could get 8 hours of sleep, eat organic foods, but if you drive without a seatbelt, you're multiplying by zero. So all the really good work that you do, all of the positive work is impacted by that one negative that you do. So ultimately, no matter what the string of numbers is, you are multiplying by zero in the end. We like to use that model when we talk to clients sometimes about their investments in technology. So I've got quite a few examples. I'll take something we've talked about so far quite a bit: cybersecurity. So you might invest heavily in network security, employee training. You've got robust antivirus software. You protect your infrastructure. Maybe you've got Windows 365. However, maybe you neglect to update your other systems. You don't patch your systems regularly, or things like that. You're actually leaving your organisation vulnerable to hackers. They'll be exploiting known vulnerabilities, which renders all the other work that you've done less effective. So that's a high level example. I want to take that approach with you, Bjorn, and think about similar models and examples for Windows 365. Now, I've got the I've got the foresight to have planned for this, and I'm throwing you in at the deep end. So I've got a few examples, but I want to kind of see if I can catch you out, if I'm honest.
Sure.
So let me throw one at you first, and then you can do one. Not do one, but you can have a go. So if I think about the software development angle you've talked about, so yeah, with Windows 365, you can deploy applications and updates to virtual PCs more easily, ensuring that all your users have access to the latest software versions without the need for time-consuming manual installations. That streamlined approach can lead to cost savings by reducing IT workload and minimizing downtime. But if you don't use those features, you're technically multiplying by 0. From your perspective, what can you think about? If we think about Windows 365, if we think about Cloud PC, if we think about that concept of doing more with less, give me some thoughts, give me some examples of what you think you might be, organisation might be leaving on the table. What might they be doing?
I've got quite a few different ideas. So you touched on end users handling their data. So for example, most organizations will use Office 365, so you can store your data in OneDrive or SharePoint. If organizations haven't enabled those capabilities to store all the relevant files that the organization holds within the protected Office 365 cloud, but for example, leave loopholes open where users can store data, I don't know, in Google Drive or Box or any other cloud storage, that's where you open yourself up, and that's a good example for multiplying by 0, because if the data is stored outside of your corporate Office 365 environment or Azure environment, you have no control over where those files are and where the files are stored or exchanged or downloaded and accessed by whoever. And that's a great example for multiplying by 0.
You got any others?
Yeah, another one, you could say, okay, yes, I leverage Windows 365, the cloud PCs, and I have got my zero trust environment, but for example, my antivirus software solution, I'm using this third-party product. And it doesn't matter which one it is and if it's rated good or bad. The fact of the matter is, if you use a third-party product or two third-party products together, so Microsoft and something else, what it means is you are creating a surface area which is an attack surface, and no two third-party products together will always work 100% seamlessly. So there's always a void, and that void compounds to the attack surface, and that means you as an organization are more vulnerable in your security posture. If you use the relevant Microsoft antivirus capabilities, which are designed to work together, you have your entire Microsoft 365 environment, including the Windows 365 Cloud PC, that's seen as one coherent ecosystem, which is a single attack surface at your outer perimeter. So that's a great example where, again, if you use third-party products, you're multiplying by 0 because you're increasing the attack surface.
Love that. Thank you. I think let's stick to security at the moment. So let me see if I can throw one out there. So let's say you've deployed Windows 365, the goal being to provide employees with a secure and flexible work environment. However, you haven't configured some of the wider security settings, so you don't have multi-factor authentication. Maybe you don't have the right training and maybe you don't have strong password policies. Maybe you've not really trained people around security, therefore people still take risks they shouldn't. In the never multiply by 0 model, you're essentially opening up to even a single compromised account could put that entire infrastructure at risk. So actually, that's an example of, don't just deploy the tool and expect it to do the work. You need to have proper guidance and support from a trained SME in this arena to make sure you get the maximum value and you aren't left. One of the way of phrasing it, I suppose, is leaving money on the table, but certainly you're not multiplying by zero.
Yeah, very much. And also end user training is important, the adoption and end user training, because with all these new capabilities, if it's not used in the correct way, even if it's as intuitive as it is these days, but still you want and have a responsibility to provide the correct guidance and training to your end users so they can use the tools effectively and in the correct way.
Okay, let's stick on security. Let's try one more with security. Endpoint security. We'll wrap up pretty soon as well. So endpoint security. So let's say your organization uses Windows 365 to, again, enable employees to work from various devices, including their personal devices. However, you don't ensure that the devices have the appropriate security measures in place, like up-to-date antivirus software or regular security patches. Just a single infected device could potentially compromise your Windows 365 environment as well. So again, there's another example. What about data storage and backup? So 365 gives us that centralized platform for storing and managing data. However, we still need to consider proper data backup and recovery. We don't want data loss, for example. So what could we do in that scenario?
Yeah, absolutely. So glad you mentioned this point, especially with Windows 365, as it's a service running in Azure. You have all the capabilities for backups and data retention that Azure has at its disposal for you. So of course you want to make sure that data and your device image, if I want to call it like this, is backed up and is available. So you have got all the capabilities, anything from versioning or even immutable backups that you can these days provision in Azure. Again, everything in a very cost-effective way. So that's important to address. But once again, making sure that you consider a wider strategy in regards to data and retention. So users' files should ideally sit, if they are personal files, should sit in OneDrive. Team-related files and documents should sit in SharePoint. There's of course a use for all the capabilities that you have in Azure files and file shares there. But it's important to plan this out as a proper digital strategy, and that's where we as Visual can help and work with you to bring all these different aspects, security and user experience and data architecture together.
As we wrap up today's episode, it's clear, to me at least, that Windows 365 is playing quite a pivotal role in shaping the future of hybrid work. It's flexible, it's secure and efficient, and it's empowering organisations of all sizes to adapt to ever-changing demands of a modern workplace. We hope you've enjoyed our discussion and gained some valuable insight into Windows 365 and how it's transforming businesses across various industries, really. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast for more episodes exploring the latest advancements in technology that are empowering the hybrid workforce. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to having you along for the next episode. Until then, stay connected, stay productive, and let's continue to empower the workforce together.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Bye.